2-1 pitch. Harris hits this one high and deep into left field. Back at the track, at the wall. It is gone! And Cleveland has done it! Dustin Harris walks it off in the bottom of the 11th inning to win the World Series for the Cleveland Guardians! Welcome back, everybody, to the Cleveland Guardians franchise here on MLB The Show 23. Last episode, we won the World Series in unbelievable fashion, defeating the Cubs 9-8 in 11 innings. The game started off quick, with them scoring 5 in the first inning, and we responded with 4 of our own. Then as the game went along, it continued to stay tight, and obviously Dustin Harris, of all people, hit the walk-off homer in the 11th inning to win the World Series. Through the 5 seasons of the series that we have gone through, we have now won 2 World Series. We beat the Rockies in 5 games in Season 3, and obviously we beat the Cubs here in 5 games this season. This has been a really fun team to follow over the last few years, and although the main portion of this series is now over, I still want to have a long-term simulation to see what happens in everybody's careers before we wrap up this series. So today, we will be going through 8 seasons into the future. We've gone through 5 seasons over the last 11 months, and now we're going to get through another 8 seasons within, less than an hour. So buckle up, because we've got a lot to go over today. We're going to see the conclusions of the careers of some of these older guys, or at least the conclusions of their primes, and we're going to see these young guys like Pena, Rowley, and Ramiro all hopefully become star-level players and enter their prime. So the team is going to look a lot different in a few years than it is now. We're going to have to make some tough decisions and let some guys go, but I'm going to do my best to keep as many of these guys around and make sure they retire as Cleveland Guardians. We've got to be smart with the budget. We've got a lot of guys under contract for next year, and we do have a few free agents. So this offseason that we're about to enter is a pivotal one. We've got Zane Rowley and Ramon Ramiro both on huge deals. We're going to try to sign Pena to his big contract soon, hopefully this offseason, but if not, within the near future, so that way he can be locked up as well. So this is your final look at what the team looks like now as we go into the first offseason. No major retirements, no Hall of Famers, nothing special there. As for free agency, we've got a few guys with team options. Shane Bieber, we are going to accept, obviously. I mean, maybe it's not that easy of a decision. His ERA was in the 4s this year, but I do want to bring him back. And then I think everybody else here we're going to let walk. John Means has been good over the last couple of years, but I'd rather open up some money. And same with Josh Bell, who showed some signs of regression this year. I think I'm ready to make Dustin Harris the full-time first baseman. And then Swanson and Cease, I don't think it would be worth it to pay them, although all of them are good players, but I think it would make a little bit more sense for us to get younger. It is a talented free agency class, and I really want to focus on pitching because other than Bieber and Hunter Green, we don't really have many proven guys in the rotation. So I decided to take a look at Sandy Alcantara of the Miami Marlins. He's a guy who I've wanted to get for a little while, and we're going to give him a 2-year deal. I'm also going to go after Trumpet Man Edwin Diaz, giving him a 3-year deal for $21 million to improve the bullpen. I also offered Alvaro Pena an 11-year extension for $209 million. That's a lot of money. After that, I decided to make a pretty big trade. Jesus Sanchez is going to the Baltimore Orioles. We have a lot of outfielders on the roster, and although I really like Jesus Sanchez, I think this makes the most sense for us. He did not perform very well last year. He wasn't good in the playoffs. He's a free agent after next year, and I don't think I really want to pay him. I think we're also getting a really good return from the Orioles with 2 very good potential prospects in first baseman Peter Garcia and second baseman Maurice McDonald. This isn't a great trade for the Orioles. However, I'm not really as worried about being realistic during the long-term sim. I just want to keep our team, good. Sandy Alcantara would accept our deal. However, Edwin Diaz would end up signing with the San Diego Padres. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, however, because we only have $7 million available in the budget, and we offered Edwin Diaz $7 million a season. So even though we don't get Trumpet Man, we do get some more financial flexibility, which could be good in terms of arbitration and tendering contracts. Everybody else who we've offered a contract to, including Alvaro Pena, accepted, and that'll bring us to the new season. This is the first season of a long-term sim, the 6th season of the series overall, now in the year of 2027. Dustin Harris will become the regular first baseman now that Josh Bell is gone. Other than that, the lineup is pretty much the same. The rotation is a little bit different with Dylan Cease gone and Sandy Alcantara now in the mix. But for the most part, the team looks pretty similar compared to last year, other than those small few little tweaks. So we're going to simulate up to the All-Star break, and we're doing fine. We're 53-44 in a very close race in the American League Central. We're currently the #1 wild card in the AL, so we're not performing poorly, but I wouldn't say we've been great. Emmanuel Clase is an all-star once again. He's having probably his best year yet, which says a lot because he is ridiculous. Ramon Ramiro, first-time all-star. That's pretty cool. Jose Ramirez is back as well. He leads all of the majors in homers with 27, and Ketel Marte is back as well. Marte and Ramirez are both in the MVP race as they are only behind Austin Riley. So unless we make any more moves, I think we're going to get to the end of the season now. There is some contract stuff I want to get through. We're going to give Ketel Marte a 3-year extension. Shane Bieber will return on a 2-year deal. Those are guys I want retiring here. We end up going 95-67, which wins us the division and the #1 seed. We ended up doing really well in the second half of the year. Ketel Marte was awesome this year. Jose Ramirez was very good too. The first baseman, Garcia, who we got from the Orioles earlier, he will get some postseason action after not playing in the regular season. The starting rotation was pretty mediocre. Sandy had the best ERA at just under 4. And then the bullpen was kind of shaky too, other than Clase. So just like the past few years, the pitching has been the kryptonite, other than Clase, who now has had 6 ridiculous all-star level seasons. So we'll be facing off against the Chicago White Sox here in the ALDS. They win the wild card game. They won 89 games this year. We've played against the White Sox in the postseason before. They do have some new faces: Henry Davis, Nolan Arenado, and Zach Gallen. We would split the first 2 games and win the next 2 as we go to the ALCS against the Baltimore Orioles, a team who we have not really seen in the playoffs yet. They've got a really good young core. They also have Jesus Sanchez, who was awesome this year. 39 homers. He hit around 300. They also have Louis St. John Jr., who is turning into a pretty good player with the Orioles. So we've got our hands full here, but we're looking pretty good. And we would end up sweeping them, scoring a lot of runs, 41 across those 4 games. And we'll face off against the Cardinals in the World Series. We almost had a rematch with the Cubs. But instead, we'll play against St. Louis, led by Aaron Nola, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Jazz Chisholm, and some other young guys. They also have former Guardian Aaron Savale as well. He is still here in St. Louis. So we split the first 2. We lose Game 3. Uh-oh. And Game 4. Oh, dear. We're in trouble. We win Game 5, so that's good. However, we lose Game 6, and we have lost the World Series to the St. Louis Cardinals. So unfortunately, we made it all the way here, but we're unable to get the job done. Kyle Lewis won the postseason MVP, but we couldn't beat St. Louis as Jordan Walker wins the World Series MVP. Clearly, the offense was very good here in the postseason. Pena was great. Playoff Zane Rowley is back. Really, everybody hit the ball well. Our offense statistically was ridiculous. As a team, we hit .319, and to put that into perspective, that's 60 points higher than second place and 81 points higher than third place. We had 99 runs, by far the most. I think we played less games than St. Louis, and our team OPS was at 950. How did we lose the World Series? Our entire team was ridiculous offensively. I was expecting the pitching stats to be a lot worse. It's not like the pitching numbers were, good, but these aren't that bad. How did we not win the World Series? This makes no sense to me. So after failing to get the job done in the Fall Classic, we will now get back to the drawing board with another offseason, and hopefully we can make some moves to help ourselves get back to our championship ways. Nobody retired in our organization, and we do have a Hall of Famer, Clayton Kershaw. Very well deserved. Probably the best pitcher of this generation. We have one free agent, and it's James Karinchak, who was not great last year, 4.73 ERA. I think it would make the most sense to let him walk after he's performed recently. Kyle Lewis has declined a player option. I would like to bring him back. He's still very, very good. So he would end up ultimately accepting. And here's free agency, which features former Guardian Jesus Sanchez, who's probably going to make a lot of money. I didn't want to pay him, although he did have a career year last year. I do want to add to the bullpen, so we're going to offer Jordan Holloway a 2-year deal, and we're going to offer David Bednar a 1-year contract for $5.5 million. Holloway is not interested in our deal. He signed a 6-year contract with the Diamondbacks. So instead of him, I decided to look at A.J. Minter instead. Jesus Sanchez ends up signing a 5-year, $95 million deal with the Red Sox, so he'll stay in the AL East. We ended up getting both of our relievers as James Karinchak signs a 4-year deal with the Texas Rangers. We're going to make another trade here, sending Sandy Alcantara to the Oakland A's for 2 pretty good prospects. Sandy wasn't horrible last year, but he did struggle in the playoffs, and I want to clear up some money. So in the Rule 5 draft, I am actually going to use our pick. We're going to select Ty Madden. I want to add another arm to the organization. He hasn't been good, and if he struggles, we can cut our losses. In spring training, he ended up playing horribly, so we're just going to cut him and forget this ever happened. So that'll bring us to Season 7 overall, the second season of the long-term sim. And again, the offense looks pretty much the same. We hit the ball at a really, really high level last year. The pitching does look a little bit different. We've now gone all aboard with our young guys in the rotation. Espino, Rodriguez, Watkins. We have Villalobos out of the bullpen. And then Michael McGreevy, of course, is still in the organization as well. He'll start the year in the minor leagues. So as we go to the All-Star break, the team, again, is doing pretty good. 60-38. We're only 3.5 ahead of the Tigers in the AL Central, but we're doing a lot better compared to last year at the All-Star break. Shane Bieber not only is an All-Star, but he is starting in the game, having himself a great Cy Young caliber season. We've missed that from him over the last couple of years. Emmanuel Clase is back, although he might finish with an ERA above 2 for the first time. Ketel Marte ended up being our only offensive player in the All-Star game. He is currently in second place for the MVP and really has not shown many signs of regression yet, despite being 34 years old. It's inevitably going to come, but it has not come yet, which is good. While Marte is still on the top of this game, I can't really say the same about Jose Ramirez, whose ratings have tanked a little bit. He's now only an 87. His numbers aren't bad, but he was not an all-star for, I believe, the first time in the entire series, and he is starting to play a little bit worse. So I also want to point out, we drafted a sick pitcher in the first round, Terry Seaver. I don't know if he's like Tom Seaver's grandson or something. So before we get to the end of the season, I do want to re-sign Emmanuel Clase to a 2-year deal and Camilo Duvall to a 3-year deal. 2 more guys who I'm planning on having retiring here. And then George Valera has been playing really well. We're going to sign him to a 4-year extension. So right before we get to the playoffs, literally the last game of the regular season, Alvaro Pena fractures his shin. That's not good. We end up going 94-68. We win the division, and we will have a rematch with the Baltimore Orioles here in the ALDS. So with Pena, he will probably not return for the entire playoffs, and he had by far the best year of his career, doubling his home run total, 282 average, 863 OPS. He was phenomenal, and that's going to be a big loss for our lineup. As for the other guys, obviously Ketel Marte finished off great. Jose Ramirez played better as the year went along. Zane Rowley had a breakout season, doubling his career home run total. And again, the offense definitely feels like the strength of the team. If we lose again, it'll probably be because of the pitching. Other than Shane Bieber, nobody was great amongst the starters. I guess Rambo Rodriguez was pretty good. The bullpen was solid, although the AJ Minter experiment really has not worked out. And Emmanuel Clase finished with a career worst 2.16 ERA. So as we face off against the Orioles, pretty similar team to last year, although they, of course, no longer have Jesus Sanchez, who's now in Boston. We win the first 2 games, and we split them. Okay, easy enough. So now we'll play against the Astros here in the ALCS. I don't think we've ever played against the Astros in a playoff series during this franchise series, oddly enough, but here we go. We finally get to. They still have Alex Bregman, still have a lot of their guys as we lose the first game. That's not good. The Astros do have home field advantage as we take the next 2. Peter Garcia, the first baseman, gets hurt, so he'll be out for like the rest of the playoffs, so that's not good as we lose Game 4. And we lose Game 5. Oh dear, we've got to make a little comeback. That'll start with Game 6, we win 9-1, and then Game 7, with Rambo on the mound, we win 4-1. And we're going to the World Series for a 3rd consecutive season, and we'll face off against the New York Mets, led by former Guardian Francisco Lindor. They have Ozzie Albies. They also have Akil Baddoo, who was on the Cubs team, who we beat 2 seasons ago. We're doing pretty well currently, up 3-1, and we finish off the job in 5. The Guardians have won our 3rd World Series in the last 5 years. We're doing the even year trend, just like the San Francisco Giants. Zane Rowley wins playoff MVP. Playoff Zane is just different. I don't know what else to say. He is a monster in the month of October. Ramiro and Marte were great as well. And then Jay Allen, of all people, wins the World Series MVP. So we have now made 4 World Series in the last 5 years, winning 3 of them. And the team played really well. Once again, Obviously, the offense was phenomenal, and the pitching was a lot better. We did have a little bit of a scare in that first series against Baltimore, but other than that, we steamrolled past Houston and we steamrolled past the Mets. So we now have 3 world championships, and we're really starting to be trending towards becoming a dynasty. I would say 3 championships in 5 years is probably a dynasty. So I think we've hit that mark, but we're still not done. We've got a lot more work to do. I want more than 3. We do have some free agents, most notably Luis Campusano and Ryan Weathers, along with some of the other bullpen arms. The only player I want to keep here is Weathers. However, we cannot afford him, so I'm going to trade A.J. Minter, who was pretty bad this year, to clear up $7.5 million, and we'll give that money to Ryan Weathers. Kyle Lewis exercises his player option, so he's back. That's cool. And Weathers gets the $7.3 million. Everybody else, including Luis Campusano, I decided to let walk. So now we've got a pretty big trade here with the Pittsburgh Pirates, giving up Elliot Ramos, Luis Toribio, and Taj Bradley, 3 good young players who I just want to give more of an opportunity to elsewhere in exchange for our new franchise catcher, Alejandro Aguero. He has played a little bit over a full season in the majors. I'm pretty sure he has 99 potential, and we're also getting Denny Gray, who's a good prospect as well in the outfield. Luis Campusano ends up signing a 6-year, $90 million deal with Atlanta. Get your bag, King. Congratulations on the money. I was not going to pay him that, though. So Alejandro Aguero slides into that catcher spot. But that's really the only change on offense, entering the 3rd season of the day and the 8th season overall. And the lineup still looks fairly similar. The pitching rotation is pretty much the same as last year, as is the bullpen. So other than the change at catcher, we really don't have many big changes to the team. And overall, the team is very similar to where we left off at the end of the last episode, all the way back in Season 5. At the All-Star break, we are 59-38, which is quite good. 2.5 games ahead of Detroit in the division, so the Tigers look like they're pretty good again. Emmanuel Clase back in the All-Star game, although his whip is at 1.55. That's a little high, but he's now made 8 in a row. Humberto Guzman also made the All-Star game, his first. Ramon Romero is back. Ketel Marte is back as well. So that's good to see. And then George Valera makes his first All-Star game as well. Got some former Guardians here, including Brian Rocchio with the Mariners, Jesus Sanchez with the Red Sox, and Luis Campusano with the Atlanta Braves. Good for them. So we'll simulate to the end of the year unless we have any moves we want to make. I want to point out that we got an awesome closer in the draft, Enrique Garcia. And then I decided to sign Shane Bieber to a 2-year extension. Jose Ramirez is back for 2 years. He is still continuing to regress. Hunter Green broke his hand with about a week left to go in the season, so we will be without him for the playoffs as we end up going 162, and we'll be playing against the Baltimore Orioles again in the ALDS. We've beaten the Orioles in the playoffs 2 years in a row. The Mariners ended up with 101 wins, so they got the number 1 seed by 1 game. Good for them, I guess. Looking at the lineup, the young guys continue to play well. Ketel Marte still is doing good. Jose Ramirez is still continuing to regress. He's an 82. Lewis and Marte are also going down in rating, but their production has still been pretty solid. And our new catcher, Aguero, was pretty good as well. As for the pitching, Shane Bieber was back to mid-4 ERAs, but everybody else, specifically Rambo, was really good. Camilo Duvall had a disappointing season in the bullpen. Really, the entire bullpen was inconsistent, but Guzman and Clase did well. So as we take a look at the Baltimore Orioles, we've beaten these guys 2 years in a row. They signed Francisco Mejia in the offseason, former Cleveland ball player, for no reason, because they have Adley Rutschman, who they also gave a huge extension to. So we win the first game, we win the second game, we're looking pretty good, and we sweep them. So now we'll play against the Mariners in the ALCS, a rematch from Season 5. The Mariners still have Bo Bichette and Julio Rodriguez, 2 of their core guys on that team. They've also stolen Casey Mize and Riley Green from the Tigers. How are the Tigers good after losing these 2? And I think Spencer Torkelson signed with the Padres too, so I don't know how Detroit's winning any games. We win the first 2, and we end up sweeping them. So we have not lost a single game in the playoffs as we're back in the World Series against the Chicago Cubs, a rematch with the Cubbies. They still have some of the same faces, Flaherty, La Stella, Reynolds. It's honestly a pretty similar team, although they have added some guys such as Sancho Andrade. We'll see if we can win World Series number 4 as we lose Game 3, our first loss of the entire postseason. We would also lose Game 4, but we win the next 2 and have won another championship. So we have now won 4 World Series in a 6-year stretch, and we have now beaten the Cubs twice within that span. So another championship for us as George Valera wins the playoff MVP and Alvaro Pena wins his second World Series MVP. Both of his World Series MVPs have come against the Cubs. Playoff Zane still doing his thing. Jose Ramirez was really good, although Marte and Lewis both were not as good during this playoff run. And then the pitching was very solid as well. We only lost 2 playoff games, both of which were in the World Series to Chicago. I really want to have one season where we sweep through the entire playoffs. I know that's pretty unlikely and pretty hard, but we almost did it this year. We were really close. So this team is officially a dynasty now, but I want to become the greatest dynasty in MLB history and try to win some more championships. So that'll bring us to the next offseason. We've now gone through 3 full seasons, and we still have 5 more to go in this episode. And keep in mind, we probably will have 1 to 2 more long-term sim episodes after this one. Catching prospect Brandon Valenzuela retires, the only player in our organization. We do have a few other former Guardians in here, including Tristan McKenzie, who calls it a career. McKenzie was an exciting young arm who I was really excited to develop as we started this series. He only had 1 really good season for us, and in year 4, we traded him to St. Louis. He was starting to regress. I saw the writing on the wall, and I very clearly was right. He just was never really the same player and did not develop into what we had hoped. As for John Means, we signed him going into Season 4, and John Means kind of pushed Tristan McKenzie out, ironically enough. Means was here for 2 years and then bounced around a little bit. But overall, he had a really solid career with a number of different teams. So hats off to both Tristan McKenzie and John Means, both of whom won 1 championship each. As we look at our free agents, we've got a few names here. Kyle Lewis, certainly the priority. I would like to bring him back on a 1-year deal. Ryan Weathers was kind of bad, but I still would like to have him around. As for the other guys, we're going to let him walk. Jay Allen wants too much money, and Eliezer Alfonso, we just don't really need him, and he wants too much money as well. Trumpet Man is back in free agency after his 3-year deal with San Diego. I would sign him for 1 year, $4 million. Jay Allen ends up signing with the Mets for big money, while Eliezer Alfonso is now with the White Sox. We have a lot of financial flexibility, not many big contracts, so because of that, I decided to make a huge move. Daniel Espino's deal is coming up soon. He just hasn't been all that consistent, and while he has gotten a lot better over the last 2 years, I just don't think he's a guy I really want to pay long term, especially considering some of the other young guys we have in terms of our pitchers, and we're going to be replacing him with Alex Cisneros, who's really, really good. We're also getting Joaquin Zambrano, a very good first base prospect, and Todd DeVarco, a good reliever. We are giving up a lot, Espino, along with Mason Wynn and Eric Pena, but we're getting a lot as well. Probably the biggest trade of the long-term sim so far. Zambrano and Cisneros will both start in the big leagues, while the reliever we got will start in the minor leagues. Nonetheless, the roster, particularly the lineup, still looks pretty similar. The pitching rotation, 1 small change with Espino being taken out for Cisneros, who we hope can develop into a true Cy Young caliber guy. And then the bullpen is going to stay the same as well. We've won back-to-back championships, 4 within the last 6 years. Let's see if we can add another one here in 2030, the 4th season of the episode. At the All-Star break, we're not doing great. We're in 4th place in the division at 52-46, but the division's very close. We have 4 teams within 3.5 games. There's a big cluster for the wild card, so we may need to make a move at the deadline to try to push up our chances. Emmanuel Clase is back in the All-Star game. His ERA is in the 3s, though. James Karinchak is in for Texas. He has been really good for them over a 3-year stretch. Peter Garcia makes the All-Star team for the first time, as does Alvaro Pena. Pena's done a lot in his Major League career, but he's never made an All-Star team. Brian Rocchio and Jesus Sanchez are back as well. Jesus Sanchez continues to rake ever since we traded him away. We did get Peter Garcia, though, in that trade, keep in mind, and he was obviously an All-Star as well. Our older bats are here, and that is because they have all regressed quite a bit. Marte and Ramirez are both not the same players they once were. You can tell Marte's been an All-Star for who knows how many years in a row now, but he's just not the same guy he once was, unfortunately. So at the deadline, I do have some contract moves. We're going to extend Emmanuel Clase for 2 years, and we end up winning 94 games, and we'll face off against the Boston Red Sox, who won 89 in the ALDS. The Rangers and Mariners both finished better than us in the American League. As we look at the numbers, Peter Garcia was great. Kyle Lewis turned back the clock. He looked very good this year. And the old guys, obviously, minus Lewis, were not all that spectacular. The young catcher, Aguero, was also pretty bad. There was another catcher I almost traded for instead of Aguero, That was Germán Rodriguez, who won the batting title and the Hank Aaron Award. I think it's fair to say I made an oopsies with which catcher I ended up getting. As for the pitching, Cisneros was okay in his first year here. Rambo Rodriguez was probably our best pitcher once again, while Daniel Espino was pretty mediocre with the Oakland A's. As for the bullpen, pretty solid. Colosio, the 3.23, by far the worst ERA of his career, which, again, doesn't say a whole lot because he's been so good. So let's take a look at the Red Sox, featuring Jesus Sanchez, the former Cleveland Guardian. They also have Gabriel Arias, one of our former prospects, who just never really has developed. They also have Miles Straw as well. Ironically, the player who we traded for Jesus Sanchez, he is now here in Boston. He spent 6 years with the Marlins and was honestly pretty good. Give him credit. So we'll see if we can beat the Red Sox here as we end up losing the first game. That's not good. We are up 2-1, and then we finish off the job. So we'll play against the Texas Rangers now in the ALCS. The Rangers are led by Julio Rodriguez. They also have James Karinchak as well as he tries to get revenge. They still have Corey Seager, and they've got some other good players on their team as well. Their roster is really, really strong. And it showed, because they're up 3-2. They've got a chance to defeat us, and they don't in Game 6. So that'll bring us to Game 7 with Bieber on the mound, and we lose. So after making the World Series 3 years in a row, we will not return, and the Rangers end up finishing off the job as they defeat the Padres. Overall, a good effort. The offense was not bad. I wouldn't say it was great. It wasn't as good as that one year where we had a 950 OPS in the playoffs and still lost, but still not great. So we've made it through 4 seasons now. We've got 4 seasons to go today, and this team is starting to look a lot different. There hasn't been any specific offseason yet where we've drastically turned it over, but every single year things have looked different, and things are going to continue to change for this team as we move forward. We've got a lot of guys who are free agents, like a lot. We have 7. Shane Bieber and Jose Ramirez, I'm going to decline their team options because I think I can sign those 2 guys both for cheaper, and I would end up offering Bieber a 2-year deal with a mutual option along with Jose Ramirez and Ketel Marte. That way we can decline the mutual option. Same with Kyle Lewis, assuming they continue to regress. As for Hunter Green, I don't think I'm going to bring him back. We signed him to a 5-year extension after that great season he had, and he just never really lived up to it. He's been a solid starter, but he's just not worth the money that he is offering. So I decided to bring our manager Giovanni Cabrera back. I've signed him to a few extensions, but this year he left. He wants to be the Yankees hitting coach. So instead we're going to hire Dave Roberts. Hopefully we're prepared for early October chokes because that's what Dave Roberts specializes in, but he is a very good manager in this game. However, just like Cabrera, these guys want smaller positions with way less money. So he's going to be the Mets farm director. 3rd time's the charm, I guess. We'll offer Kevin Felsch a 3-year deal to be our manager. He's a lot cheaper than Dave Roberts. So in hindsight, this kind of ended up working out. And thankfully, he would accept. Why does nobody want to coach us? I don't know. So that'll bring us to free agency. Jose Ramirez accepted his contract while the other guys are still thinking about it, I guess. They'll accept. Spoiler alert, I'm not letting any of them go. However, I really want to make a big splash this offseason. I want to get a stud. It's not this trade, although I do like Orlando Higgins. He's a good player. We're trading Tyson Stone for him. This is the big trade that I want to make, and we are giving up a lot. Giovanni Carnevale, Doug Merrifield, and Julian Garcia are going to the Padres for Grayson Rodriguez, the highest-rated pitcher in the entire game right now. He is making a lot of money, but we have a lot of financial flexibility. I'll probably trade him towards the end of that contract once he starts to regress, but I really want a true ace. Now that Hunter Green is gone, he signed a 6-year deal with the Giants, we have not just a replacement for him, but an upgrade with Grayson Rodriguez. I decided to make one more move before the season, and that is signing Franmil Reyes. He was here for the first 3 seasons of the series. He won an MVP at one point, but things ultimately didn't work out. I ended up letting him go and obviously basically chose Kyle Lewis over him. And I think in hindsight we made the right decision, but I do want him to retire here in Cleveland. So I was able to agree to a deal. We're going to have him in the minor leagues, and hopefully we can get him in the bigs one more time before he retires. So this is what the lineup looks like going into the 5th season today, the 10th season now overall of the series. That's right, we have made it through pretty much an entire decade now, which is crazy. And I think this is probably the most turmoil we've had in one offseason, specifically with the Grayson Rodriguez trade, which is by far the biggest move we have made during the long-term sim up to this point. So as we simulate up to the All-Star break, the team is playing really well. We're 61-37, 8.5 games ahead of the Tigers for first place in the division, and we have the second best winning percentage in baseball. Emmanuel Clase has now made an All-Star team in the last 10 years. That's insane. All 10 seasons, he has made the All-Star team. That's crazy. Ricky Watkins is also an All-Star for the first time. Very cool to see. And then we also had Ramon Ramiro get in along with George Valera and Zane Rowley, his first. I wasn't sure Rowley ever would be an All-Star, and he's been in the league for a little while, but he's really developed into a good player. Grayson Rodriguez has been a little bit mediocre. However, Alex Cisneros, on the other hand, has had his best year yet, which is really good to see. So I do want to re-sign Rambo Rodriguez. He's a free agent at the offseason. He's been really consistent and really good over the last 4 years. I think it'd be a mistake to let him go, so we would agree to an extension. Unfortunately, Jose Ramirez fractured his wrist in August, and Ketel Marte tore a finger ligament in September, so we will be without both of them for the playoffs. Both of them have continued to really show signs of regression. Jose's only a 71 overall, while Marte's only a 76. Marte still had a decent year, but yeah, these two are not the same as they once were. We ended up going 102-60, which is good enough for the number 1 seed in the American League. Zane Rowley finished with an average of 304, 23 homers, and an OPS above 900. If this can be like his prime, I'd be really happy with that. I didn't know he would ever get to become this good, so I'm really happy to see that Zane Rowley has developed into an awesome early at the lineup bat. George Valera as well, his contact ratings are at 97 across the board. He also has exceeded my expectations in his development. The other young guys are playing well, although the catcher, Aguero, was kind of disappointing. As for Kyle Lewis, not good. He hits under 200. He might be cooked, unfortunately. Alex Cisneros finished with an ERA just at around 3. He ended up winning the Cy Young Award this year. That's pretty awesome. So that trade has certainly paid off. And then Camilo Doval, we didn't show him, but his ratings have also fallen off a cliff. And he is a free agent at the end of the season. His 3-year, $27 million extension is now pretty much over. So in the first round of the playoffs, we will face off against the Detroit Tigers. We've faced off against them in the playoffs before. We've had some fun, entertaining series with them. They're led by a couple former AL Central shortstops who are now in Detroit with Bobby Witt Jr. and Riconde Diaboculis, the latter of whom is one of the best offensive players in baseball. They also have former Guardians prospect Taj Bradley, who's developed into a pretty solid starter. We split the first 2 and we lose Game 3, and then we lose Game 4, and we're out. We won 102 games, but only won 1 in the postseason. Not good. The Tigers ended up taking it all the way. They beat the Brewers in the World Series. I'm pretty sure every time we've lost in the playoffs, it's been to the eventual World Series champion, and the Tigers keep that streak going after just barely getting a wild card spot. So we do have some interesting retirements. Freddie Freeman caught my eye, not because of his role within this series, but he retired due to a dislocated ankle. And oddly enough, he retired in Atlanta with the Braves, and he finished over 3,000 hits. That's pretty cool. Speaking of former Braves, Max Fried has also retired. We acquired him back in Season 3, hoping he'd be the missing piece for us, and he was, because we won a World Series that year. I tried to bring him back that free agency, but he signed a 6-year deal with the Dodgers, the final 3 years of which he played in Toronto. He was solid, but never really lived up to his contract, and after a few years in Toronto, he did not play anywhere this year, and then he's calling it a career. Overall, a really, really good player, though. Obviously, Freddie Freeman is a Hall of Famer, along with Mike Trout and Jose Altuve. Shohei Ohtani also retired in this class, but he did not, unfortunately, make the Hall of Fame. So we've got a lot of guys on team options, a lot of older guys. Now, we are going to accept them for Clase and Valera. They'll be back. Those guys haven't regressed at all. But these older guys have regressed, and I think they're asking for slightly less money, so that's what we are going to give them. As for Franmil Reyes, I still think it's a little bit while until he retires, and he's asking for a lot of money, as is Kyle Lewis. I just don't think it's worth it. Again, I hope those two retire here. I'm going to make sure of it. As for Camilo Doval, we will offer him a 15-year deal for $540,000 a year. Once players become bad enough, they're going to ask for super small deals, which we can make long-term. So Doval is the first one who's going to get that. Jose Ramirez has declined his player option. I don't know why. He's getting older and should want less money, but I guess not. Okay. That'll bring us into free agency now. We still have a good amount of money to play with, but we've got a lot of guys who are free agents soon. Clase, Valera, Ramon Ramiro's contract is up. So James Karinchak's 4-year deal in Texas ran out. He's been really good with them. Kind of want to bring him back. I feel like we made a mistake by letting him go. Louis St. John, by the way, left Baltimore. He is now a Cincinnati Red. Seeing somebody named Louis St. John not in an Orioles jersey feels like a crime. Daniel Espino, by the way, ended up signing a big deal with the Padres. I would not have been willing to pay him that. I would rather give that money to a guy like Rambo Rodriguez. And then ultimately, we did bring back James Karinchak, which is pretty cool. And I also want to extend Alex Cisneros, 7 years, about $200 million. That's a lot of money. He's a free agent in the offseason. He just won the Cy Young. I think he can be our ace for the next decade. We could not sign him to the original deal, so instead, we're going to give him 3 years for 105. We're also going to extend George Valera here in spring training, along with Ramon Ramiro, although we don't have enough money for him, unfortunately, or Clase. I'm not going to worry about it. We're just going to make it work at the trade deadline or in the offseason. So this is what the lineup looks like going into the 6th season of the day, the 11th season overall. We went through 5 full seasons in the series, and we have now gone through 5 additional seasons today. We still have a large part of our core together, but a lot of these guys are starting to age. Let's get to the All-Star break now. The team is ranked first in a lot of major categories. Before that, though, I want to start talking about milestone hunting because certain players are getting pretty close, including Jose Ramirez. He's a few years away from 3,000 hits, assuming he stays healthy and still plays. He's really close to 5,000 home runs. Maybe he'll make that mark this year. As for Ketel Marte, he's getting hits at a faster pace than Jose Ramirez is, so I think he'll more likely to get to 3,000 hits earlier. I don't see him getting 500 home runs, however. As for Shane Bieber, he's pretty close to 3,000 strikeouts. He's probably 2, maybe 3 seasons away. Hopefully we can get him there in 2 seasons, but I'm not entirely sure. As for Emmanuel Clase, he's getting pretty close to 500 saves. He will soon be 3rd all-time in saves. Trevor Hoffman and Mariano Rivera both have over 600, so Clase's got some work to do, but I do think he will eventually break the record set by Mariano Rivera. As for all the young guys we've seen in throughout this series, they're all in their primes. Alvaro Pena, Ramon Ramiro, Zane Rowley. This is the best they're going to be, and all 3 of them are all-star level players. We're now at the All-Star break, and we are 55-42, half a game behind the Tigers for first place in the American League Central. I feel like our team is way better after the All-Star break. I don't know why. Grayson Rodriguez made the All-Star team. He's having a great year. I'm still planning on trading him once we get to the end of that extension, but it's good to see him playing well. Emmanuel Clase is back. He might be having his best year yet, which says a lot. And he is now just 11 saves away from 500. Joaquin Zambrano makes the All-Star team for the first time, and Zane Rowley is back, and he's been even better than he was last year. So we could not re-sign Ramon Ramiro and Emmanuel Clase last year in spring training. We still cannot re-sign Ramiro. We can re-sign Clase, however, but I am a little bit worried we're not going to have enough money to sign Ramiro or Ricky Watkins, who I also really want to pay, in the offseason. So because of that, we may need to trade Grayson Rodriguez now. And I really don't want to do it because he's an all-star level player, but I really want to keep Ramiro and Watkins around. I found this trade with the Rockies, and I really thought about it. We're not going to get a better offer for Rodriguez later. I was originally planning on doing it, but I ultimately decided no. We're going to keep Grayson Rodriguez and hope we can make it work in the offseason as Ricky Watkins fractures his head. Yikes. We would end up going 97-65 with our decision to keep Grayson Rodriguez on the team. The old guys are continuing to regress. Jose Ramirez hit under 200, while the younger guys are continuing to play well. Look at Alvaro Pena's numbers. Holy smokes, he had himself a great year. Obviously, Zane Rowley played very well as well, making the All-Star team. Despite his 191 average, Ramirez hit 14 homers, meaning that he is 2 away from 500. As for the pitching, Grayson Rodriguez ended up winning the American League Cy Young. I think Alex Cisneros finished in the top 3 as well. In the first round of the playoffs, we will face off against the Toronto Blue Jays. Oh man, I am excited to get revenge. We played against the Blue Jays a lot during the series itself. We've not faced off against them since Season 4 when they beat us in the ALCS the year we won 111 games. And we get revenge all right by sweeping them. So now we're going to play the Boston Red Sox in the ALCS. They've got a good team. They still have Jesus Sanchez, who still is really, really good. Had an over 900 OPS this year. So we win the first game and the second game. We have not lost yet, right as I say that we lost. But we are going to the World Series, and we are going to face off against the Cubs again. This is the 3rd time in the last, I guess, 6-7 years that we're playing against the Cubs. Their roster looks a lot different. They still have some guys from their original World Series team as we split the first two. We lose Game 3, take Game 4, we win Game 5, and we finish off the job. So we have won another World Series, championship number 5 for the Cleveland Guardians as Joaquin Zambrano wins the postseason MVP. And the World Series MVP is George Valera. This is our 3rd time beating the Cubs in the World Series. Talk about getting closure. From the 2016 World Series, we've now beaten the Cubs 3 separate times. Playoff Zane hit like 360. Shocker. Everybody else on offense hit the ball well. The pitching was good. Grayson Rodriguez was awesome. I think we made the right move by not trading him, but we still need to hope we have enough money for Ramon Romero. And if we don't, I really don't want to trade G-Rod because he's so good, but I might not have a choice if we want to bring back everybody who we want to bring back. So we've now gone through 6 seasons today, 11 in total, and we've got 2 more to go in this episode. So we've got 2 more off seasons. We have a number of former prospects retiring, including Aaron Brocco, who's been here since day 1, along with Ruben Cardenas, and one of our former draft picks, Manuel Ramirez. That's how far along we've gone with having draft picks retire. Aaron Savale is also retiring. He had a very interesting career. Spent the first 2 years here in Cleveland, where he was fine. He kind of sold in the playoffs in 2023, so we traded him to St. Louis for Mason Wynn and Michael McGreevy, which was really good value. McGreevy is still here on our team, but Savale was great for a few years in St. Louis. The Cardinals certainly won that trade, although I think it kind of worked out for us too. Another OG Guardian, Ahmed Rosario, is retiring. We traded him at the deadline in Season 2 to the Padres for Robert Hassell and Ryan Weathers. Hassell was the bigger get in that deal. However, during the series itself, Ryan Weathers made by far a bigger impact. He was a huge piece to the bullpen. Weathers is still on the team, as is Robert Hassell. Rosario had some solid years, mainly in Oakland, along with other places, as Manny Machado ends up being a Hall of Famer. And for what it's worth, all of Jose Ramirez's career numbers are pretty much a little bit better than Manny Machado. So I think that means Jose Ramirez is pretty much a guaranteed Hall of Famer. Going into the offseason, we have $14.5 million in the budget. That is not enough money for Ramon Romero, along with the other guys I want. So we might have to do some trades. Or do we? I declined a bunch of team options, and we're now at $38 million. Along with that, Ramon Romero's asking price has dropped significantly. Shout out to Ramon Romero, taking a pay cut to keep the band together. So that means we're going to have enough money for Romero and Ricky Watkins, who hopefully can recover from his injury. I still want to clear up some extra money, however, so we'll be trading Rambo Rodriguez to the Rays. Rodriguez has been really solid, but Grayson Rodriguez was so good last year, it just would not make sense to trade him. We're getting 2 pretty good prospects, specifically shortstop Jaime Guzman, and I think that could be a really solid trade for us, although I'm going to miss Rambo. We now have $60 million available in the budget, and we don't even have to trade Grayson Rodriguez, which really worked out. So we're able to re-sign Romero and Watkins and all the other guys I want to pay. Tommy Madlock and Michael McGreevy will not be coming back. I want to give them better opportunities elsewhere. And then Dustin Harris will also be not coming back. So this is an interesting one because obviously he had the big walk-off homer, and I really wanted him to be the full-time first baseman. It just didn't really work out. He will 100% retire as a Guardian, but I want him to get an opportunity to start elsewhere. So everybody other than Jose Ramirez accepted. We don't have a lot of money left in the budget, but we're still in the positive, which is good. I then traded a few more prospects, guys who I wanted to get an opportunity in the big leagues, to the Diamondbacks for a really good reliever in Chad Park. Tommy Madlock, by the way, signs an $100 million deal with the Tampa Bay Rays. Good for him. Get your bag, king. Dustin Harris signs with the Dodgers, 2 years, $16 million. Hopefully he can be the full-time starter at first base. And Michael McGreevy ended up signing elsewhere too. We did get Jose Ramirez back, though. He did eventually accept. So this is what the lineup looks like going into season 12 overall, the 7th season of the day. We've still got the old guys at the bottom. The lineup has really started to change a lot, although we still have our same core of guys together for the most part. The pitching rotation has really changed, however. It's only Shane Bieber and Ricky Watkins left, although we still have some of our same relievers with Villalobos, Duvall, Karinchak, and Clase. So let's go up to the All-Star break now, see how the team does, and we ended up having another very good first half of the season. per usual. Who could have guessed that? We ended up going 59-39, 5 games ahead of Minnesota for first place in the American League Central. So the division is pretty close, but we do have a nice lead. Grayson Rodriguez will be starting in the All-Star game. He is having an even better season than last year. Terry Seaver is also an All-Star, along with former Guardians Taj Bradley and Rambo Rodriguez. Humberto Guzman is back, along with Emmanuel Clase, who's actually been kind of bad this year. He does have over 500 saves now, but his ERA is in the 4s. I guess they just wanted to give him an All-Star just to keep his streak up, which I appreciate. Ramon Romero is an All-Star as well, as is Luis Campusano in his first year in Minnesota. A couple other former Guardians here, including Brian Rocchio and Jay Allen. Good for them. Jose Ramirez is still regressing quite a bit. He is over 500 home runs now, which is awesome. Welcome to the club. So let's get to the end of the season now, unless I have any other further moves I need to make in terms of trades or contract extensions. And ultimately, we did not. We ended up going 99-63. We got the number 1 seed in the American League again. We've won the division every single season during the long-term sim. I'm pretty sure that's now 10 consecutive seasons total of winning the division and 11 straight in the playoffs. Alvaro Pena is now a 99 overall, the first player in the series to do so. Ramiro and Rowley both had big batting averages. George Valera also played very well. Grayson Rodriguez won the Cy Young Award again, so he has now won back-to-back. I think it's safe to say we made a good decision by holding on to him. And Emmanuel Clase ended up with a 4.69 ERA. Not great. So we'll face off against the Detroit Tigers here in the first round. Again, the Tigers are pretty similar to when we last played them a couple of seasons ago. So hopefully we can get revenge as they beat us the last time we saw them in the playoffs. So we win the first game, good. We lose the second game. Alex Cisneros has an ERA at 33. We lose game 3. We win game 4. How about game 5? At home, we win, and we get to play the Blue Jays again. We're looking for revenge, part 2. We beat these guys last time we saw them, and we're going to try to beat them again. Pretty much the same team as last time around. They also have former Guardians prospect, the other Manuel Ramirez. We're doing pretty good so far. We're up 3-1, but we lose game 5, but we win game 6. And look who it is in the World Series. It's the Cubs again. The 4th time that we're facing off against the Cubs. Their roster has really started to change a lot. Nobody from their original World Series team is here. Can we beat them again? It's looking good. We're up 3-1, but we lose game 5, and we win game 6. So there you go. We continue to own the Chicago Cubs. We've now won 6 World Series championships, with Ramiro winning postseason MVP, Valera winning World Series MVP, and of our 6 World Championships, 4 of them have now been against the Chicago Cubs. Everybody on offense did well. I don't think Zane Rowley has ever had a playoff run where he's hit under 300. Alex Cisneros was kind of bad, but other than that, the pitching as a whole was kind of bad, to be honest. But our offense carried us to another championship. We're now 6-1 all-time in World Series. We have 2 more notable prospects, well, not really notable, but 2 more prospects retiring. And we also have Josh Bell retiring as well. I want to give him a big shout-out. We signed him in the Season 1 offseason, and he was our first baseman for the next 5 years. He did decline a little bit towards the end, but he was still a really, really good hitter. His OPS consistently, at least in the 800s. He had 2 more seasons with the Rockies and the Tigers where he was pretty solid before just kind of zoning off the grid. But overall, a really great career from Josh Bell. For those who have not been around the channel for multiple years, you may not know this, but Josh Bell in our Pirates franchise in MLB The Show 20 was awesome. He won multiple MVPs. He was basically what Jose Ramirez is to this team. The guy who we started with, who ends up becoming the franchise player. So it was pretty cool to have Josh Bell not only come back for another series, but continue to be a really integral piece to championship teams. Along with him, we do have some other familiar names here, including Adbert Alzolay. We had him as a starting pitcher in seasons 2 and 3. He was then part of the Hunter Green, Jay Allen trade. In hindsight, that was a pretty good deal for us, although neither players worked out as well as we had hoped. Alzolay had some good years after and ended up being a pretty good player. Franmil Reyes is also retiring. I wish he could have retired in our organization. He was just asking for too much money. I would have probably tried to sign him this offseason with a long 15-year deal like we did with Duvall. Obviously, at the MVP in 2023, had another good season in 2024, but then we let him go. We thought he doesn't provide enough defensively. He didn't play well in the playoffs. And in hindsight, I think that was a good decision. Kyle Lewis ended up being better for those last few years. Miles Straw is also retiring. He spent 6 seasons in Miami, and while Jesus Sanchez is a better player than him, the Marlins made out pretty well in that trade because they got a long-term outfielder. Stephen Kwan is also retiring. He had a good rookie season with us, but then it just never really materialized after that. I think in real life, Stephen Kwan will certainly have a better career than he had in this series. We did trade him for a former World Series MVP, Eliezer Alfonso. Corey Seager and Bryce Harper are Hall of Famers as we get to the final offseason of today's episode. We have to pay Alejandro Aguero and Peter Garcia. I do want to extend Aguero. I think he's really developed well, but he wants a max pretty much, and we cannot afford that. As for Garcia, I feel like he's just been inconsistent. He's not great against lefties. He was really good last year, but I think we're going to let him walk. We do have an opening with our manager, and I wanted to bring Giovanni Cabrera back now that he's no longer like the Yankees hitting coach or whatever. So he's back on a 6-year deal. Good for him. We need him back, although the other manager was pretty good too. So going into free agency, I still want to bring back Aguero. Kyle Lewis is in here. I want to sign him officially to a long-term deal. We let him go a couple years ago. He hasn't signed anywhere, so hopefully we bring him back. Aguero's getting some huge offers. 10 years, $280 million. We cannot afford that. The catcher we almost traded for instead of him, Herman Rodriguez, also wants a lot of money, so it's not going to work. In other words, we're going to need a new catcher. So we'll be trading for Santiago Chachin from the Orioles. He has 99 potential, but he's not ready yet. So I wanted to get a decent veteran as well, and we'll be getting Ken Seaver from the San Francisco Giants. So we've got our catcher for right now, and we've got our catcher in the future as well. So we're set at catcher for probably the next decade, assuming all goes well. Herman Rodriguez signed a 2-year deal with the Red Sox, so he goes from the Yankees to the Red Sox. Yikes. Kobe Mayo, former Guardians prospect, hit .311 last year with 39 homers. Holy cow. As for our big-time free agents who we let walk this year, Peter Garcia ended up signing with the Phillies, and Alejandro Aguero signs a $277 million deal with the Giants. By the way, Elliot Ramos has been in Pittsburgh for a while. He's actually been really good. Ended up signing with the Oakland Athletics. So before the season started, our first baseman, Bryant Rodriguez, got hurt. He was finally going to be the full-time first baseman, and then he gets injured. So he's going to miss like a month or two, which is kind of unfortunate. The roster continuing to change with our longtime first baseman and catcher gone. The pitching rotation still looks pretty similar to what it's been the past couple of years as we enter the final season of today's episode. Taking a look at our milestone watch, Jose Ramirez is still a little ways away from 3,000 hits and 600 homers. I do think he can hit it, assuming he doesn't retire soon, which I've seen players in this game play into their 50s. Ketel Marte is a little bit closer to 3,000 hits. He won't hit that this season, but maybe in a few years. Shane Bieber is very close to 3,000 strikeouts, and Emmanuel Clase is creeping up towards 600 saves. Shane Bieber might hit 3,000 strikeouts in this season, but that'll be the only big thing in terms of milestones that could happen. Ketel Marte dislocated his ankle in July, so that's unfortunate. He'll be out for the rest of the year. I also want to point out that we had a ridiculously good draft. We had 6 guys with at least 85 potential. Not too shabby. We're 62-35. We are playing awesome baseball. Orlando Higgins is the all-star starting pitcher. Along with Terry Seaver, Taj Bradley is in there as well. Emmanuel Clase is back, a 13th straight all-star game, and he's back to having a really good ERA. Alvaro Pena and George Valera are also all-stars as well. Alvaro Pena in particular is having a ridiculous season. He's hitting .356. George Valera is hitting like .370 for what it's worth. We have the top 3 guys for Cy Young currently, and we also have the last 3 Cy Young winners. So the only teams on the screen are us. That's pretty impressive. Let's do some simulating now. We do have some contract business to get through. George Valera is hitting .378. That's absurd. We cannot let him go anywhere because he is not regressing in the slightest. He is one of the best contact hitters really of the last like 30 years. Joaquin Zambrano, I signed to a 1-year deal. I didn't want to lock him up, but I do want him back. And Orlando Higgins, for being the best pitcher in the AL, is surprisingly cheap. The team ended up going 101-61. We won the AL Central again, and once again are the number 1 seed in the American League as we gear up for our final playoff run of today's portion of a long-term simulation. As we take a look at the team numbers, Alvaro Pena did go down in rating, but he had by far his best season yet. Those numbers are ridiculous. George Valera only hit .355, a little bit of a down second half of the year after he was hitting like .390 at the beginning of July. Alex Cisneros ended up winning the Cy Young Award over Orlando Higgins, but both of them were really good. Unfortunately, Shane Bieber did not get to 3,000 strikeouts because he got injured, but he should be able to hit that mark next season. We did not have Alvaro Pena win the MVP, which is stupid. I thought he should have. We did have Alex Cisneros obviously win the Cy Young over Orlando Higgins. So Cisneros and Grayson Rodriguez both now have 2. We're facing off against the Twins here in the first round of the playoffs in the ALDS. We've played against the Twins before. They're led by MVP winner Nolan Gorman. They still have Yordan Alvarez. They also have former Guardian prospect Gabriel Arias. Bryant Rodriguez, our first baseman, is out for the rest of the playoffs. That's not good. You know what else is not good? We're tied at 2, and we lose in Game 5. So we are out. Minnesota Twins upset us, and ultimately the Cubs finally win a championship. Now that we're not in the World Series, the Cubs can actually win it. They end up beating Boston with Sancho Andrade winning the postseason MVP, Adrian Del Castillo World Series MVP, and in the AL, the playoff MVP is former Guardians prospect Luis Toribio. Good for him. So before we end today's episode, we'll go into the start of the offseason, and I was greeted by an absolute bombshell. Wow, look at this. Shane Bieber, Camilo Doval, Ketel Marte, and Jose Ramirez are all retiring. This completely shocked me. I did not see this coming at all. In this game, during long-term simulations, if you keep players around, they will play into their 50s. So I assume these guys were going to be here for a while, but that's not the case. I don't even know where to begin. I think we'll start with Ketel Marte because he's the only guy who I thought had a chance of retiring because of his injury, and ultimately that ended up being the case. Marte had a phenomenal major league career, just shy of 3,000 hits. He started off in Seattle and Arizona, was a good player. We acquired him at the Season 1 trade deadline, and he has been a rock star for the last decade plus. A consistent all-star, usually hit over 300, 30-plus homers, 100-plus RBIs, good, versatile defense, a mainstay within the top of our order, usually batting in the number 2 or the number 3 hole. And during this series, there were often times where he was our best player, period. We really built our team around him, and he ended up being a total stud. He unfortunately just misses out on a career 300 batting average at 299, but hats off to Ketel Marte for a great career. Let's do Camilo Doval next. We traded for him in the Season 1 offseason from the San Francisco Giants, and he's been a really good reliever. He never was a closer for us. He only had 13 career saves, half of which were with the Giants, oddly enough. But he's been a really solid middle reliever for us for the last decade. Another guy who consistently got a lot of innings. 2024 was his best season. He made an all-star team that year, and he closed out our very first World Series championship. Maybe we'll see him again in MLB The Show 23, as the Giants are one of the teams we are considering for our franchise series, which starts in around 2 weeks. I decided to save these two for last, Bieber and Ramirez, because these have been our 2 day 1 guys. And when we started the series, these were our 2 big building blocks. And boy, did they live up to expectations. Starting with Shane Bieber, a rock-solid ace for us over the last 5 years. He won a Cy Young in Season 2. Things weren't always perfect with Shane Bieber. He had some rough stretches, but in the playoffs, he usually was very consistent. During the long-term sim, he was a little disappointing. He only had his ERA under 4 once, and he really got bad towards the end. He just missed out on 3,000 strikeouts. He would have gotten there this year had he not gotten injured and missed like 2 months. But overall, a great career for Shane Bieber. The Shane train, Bieber fever. And then we'll wrap things up with Jose Ramirez, our main building block on day 1. He's been the face of this franchise throughout the entire series. He made his debut over 20 years ago. He was the only remaining piece in the 2016 World Series team. And during the 5 years of the actual series, he was really, really good. He made the All-Star team, I'm pretty sure all 5 seasons. He won the MVP in 2025. Hit for good power, hit for decent contact, got on base, played pretty good defense. And then during the long-term sim, he had 2 more really good seasons, and then he started to regress, but he still had a really good career. Like Marte, we did not get him to 3,000 hits, but he is part of the 500 home run club with 528 through his 20-plus year career. It's been a pleasure having Jose Ramirez in this series as our franchise player, really since day 1, and I'm certainly going to miss using him. I've had a lot of fun building this team around Jose Ramirez and Shane Bieber and Ketel Marte and all these guys. So of this group, I think we're going to have multiple Hall of Famers. Camilo Duvall probably won't get in, but I think the other three absolutely should. Bieber, Marte, and Ramirez all belong in the Hall of Fame. I think there's no doubt about that. All four of these guys have been such huge integral pieces of this series really since the beginning. And with these guys gone, most of the OGs are not around anymore. Emmanuel Clase is still kicking it, but not much is left. Funny enough, one of the guys in the Ketel Marte trade, Oscar Mercado, has also retired. He ended up being a decent major leaguer. No Ketel Marte, but, solid enough. Some other recognizable names here, including Manuel Margot and Dylan Cease. So there you go. It's been a pleasure. Shane Bieber, Camilo Duvall, Ketel Marte, and Jose Ramirez as J-Ram and Marte both get in the Hall of Fame. Very well deserved for both of them. I think Shane Bieber should have gotten in here too, but I'm happy that we have J-Ram and Marte representing our team in the Hall of Fame. So with that, we don't have a lot of old guys left. Kyle Lewis and James Karinchak are still here. Emmanuel Clase is still really good at 37 years old. He should be able to break the saves record in the next episode. We're certainly going to watch that moment happen in game. I'm not just going to simulate throw it. That's kind of the big deal. And then our other guys like George Valera, he's 34. Rowley and Ramiro are 30. Pena's 29. These guys are all getting older. They're all in their primes right now. They're all all-star level players, but eventually they're going to regress too. And we're going to see them wrap up their careers most likely in the next episode. I'm planning for next episode to be the final part of the long-term sim and thus the finale. There's a chance that I do that within a 2-episode span, but my goal is to have all of that within the next episode. We're currently in 2034. We're going to go as long as we need to. I've seen guys play into their 50s in this game before, but seeing guys like Bieber and J-Ram retire in their early 40s, maybe MLB The Show patched that, and maybe we won't see our guys play into their 50s. I don't know. We're going to find out in the next episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this one nonetheless. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.